I'm Casey Freed Jennings. I am the director of the Girl Rising U.S. Educator Program. I've been with Girl Rising since the very beginning, before we even know what Girl Rising was or would become. And we're all very excited to be here today. We love talking to educators, and we hope we have something that you will appreciate. What is Girl Rising and why are we here today? The first answer is we're a global nonprofit organization, and we use stories to change the way the world values girls and the way girls value themselves. And why are we here? We're here today because we, and a lot of the teachers we know and have worked with around the world, we believe that Girl Rising can be a truly powerful resource for you, one that will help you do what I suspect you want to do, which is to inspire your students to see beyond their borders, both geographical and cultural, to understand issues of educational and gender equity, to recognize that they, your students, have a story to tell and that their story has value and it deserves to be heard, and that they have personal agency, that they can make change happen for themselves, for their families, for their communities, for the world. So that's why we're here. But I'm going to stop here for just a moment because I want to ask a quick question. This is not a test, but I want to ask the quick question. If you can just put your answer in the chat. How many girls do you think are out of school worldwide? 1 million? 5 million? I can't see what the next one is. 30 million or 130 million? Okay, as I say, it's not a test. We're just sort of curious what you think. See, we have 130, 135. And if you have any thoughts about way too many, that is right. Well, yeah, it is. The answer is, as some of you saw, 130 million. And that number is massive, but it's been made even worse by the pandemic. And the reasons, there are many, as many of you know that, there are child marriage, modern day slavery, gender violence, extreme poverty, religious and cultural tradition, and many others. So that's the distressing part of it, and that's the depressing part of it. But Girl Rising is really about the other part of it. Girl Rising is about what happens when girls are educated. It's about how the world becomes healthier, stabler, more prosperous, and just better for everyone, not just for girls, because when girls are educated, everything changes. In a couple of minutes, my fellow presenters, who are both real educators, will take you through how they've used Girl Rising, how they've used it with their students in their classes, and what the impact is that they have seen. But first, I want to introduce you to some young people. I call these the faces of change. These are the girls whose stories are the heart and soul of Girl Rising. There are 9 girls from 9 countries, 9 stories of resilience and change, 9 girls who represent millions and millions of others around the world. For example, Soka. Soka's an orphan, and she literally grew up scavenging for survival in the garbage dumps of Phnom Penh, Cambodia. And Senna found poetry amid extreme poverty and some of the most grueling conditions you can imagine in a coal mining town high up in the Andes Mountains. And Wadley, if you just look at Wadley's smile, you can see why everyone falls in love with Wadley. She just refused to take no for an answer. And Suma, whose story you're going to see very, very shortly. These and the several other stories that we tell in the Girl Rising film are the spine of all the resources we have, all our educational resources, and you're going to hear more about them in a moment. And just before we roll the video, I want to tell you just a little bit about how we do the stories, because it's fairly unique. We tried really hard to figure out how to tell these stories with as much authenticity as possible. And so we paired each girl with a woman writer from her own country. And the idea was to try and help give the girl voice, give her story voice and shape, with the help of someone who really knows the culture and understands it far better than we possibly could, and with whom the girl would connect in ways that she couldn't connect with us. And then we used a variety of techniques and styles to realize that story. But the constant in every one of these stories is that they are all about girls who face formidable barriers to their education and independence with fortitude and courage. So now I'm going to shut up for a bit and you can see for yourself. We're going to show you Suma's story. This runs about 12 minutes, and after Suma's story, you're going to hear from Ann Sharkey and Taylor Lifka about how they've used Girl Rising with their students.
Girls who go to school see immediate benefits far beyond the things they're learning. Being a student enhances their status in the community. It improves their health. It makes them safer. But in the developing world, getting an education is not what most people expect girls to do. Girls are expected to work, to fetch water, to care for younger children, to get jobs, or worse. It happens to girls like Suma. Suma's parents didn't send her to school, they sent her to work. In Nepal, it's called Kamlari.
I write songs to remind myself that my memories are real. And often, because there's so much sadness behind me, what comes out is sad. Both of my parents were bonded as Kamlar and Kamlari in their childhood. That's the way things have been around here. That's the way they have been for the poor. You have to bond yourself to a master, otherwise, how will you live? This was the house of my first master. My mother and father bonded me just so that I would have somewhere to live and enough food to eat. I was 6 years old. Fagutaru was a landlord and a miller. He made me work from 4 in the morning till late at night. I had to clean the house and wash the dishes and go to the forest to fetch firewood. When I wasn't minding the goats, I had to mind the children. The goats were nicer. The daughters made fun of me because my clothes were torn. They teased me. They beat me. I wanted my mother and father to take me back. I wanted them to let me stay at home and go to school like my brother. But when I thought about how poor they were and how much they too had suffered, it made me feel weak. I couldn't ask. This was the house of my second master. Janakamala wore a uniform to work. He and the mistress of the house were very hard-hearted. Unlucky girl, they used to call me. Hey, unlucky girl, do this, they'd shout. They made me sleep in the goat shed and wear rags and eat scraps from their dirty plates. I can't really talk about everything that happened to me here, but I will never forget. This is where I began to write songs. Only the songs got me through.
स्वार्थी बाटो मर्दै बाबा काकर जन्म दिलुट छाई काकर जन्म दिलुट छाई दादु भैया नि स्कुलमा पढ्न मै दुखी छाई जिन्दरुवा घर जाइना मारा खैना कसिन मरी जीवन
This was the house of my third master. I was 11 years old when I arrived at Chitai Tharu's house. I had been a Kamlari for 5 years. It wasn't as bad here. I mean, it was bad because there was a lot of work. But there was a lodger in that house, a school teacher called Bimal Sir. He changed my life. Bimal Sir convinced my master and mistress to enroll me in a night class. All of us would gather after finishing our day's work, and we would learn to read and write. I loved that night class so much. It was run by social workers for girls just like me, Kamlaris. We would also talk to the teachers about what it was like to be a Kamlari. And as we talked, we began to realize that bonded labor was, and isn't it, slavery. The teachers who ran the night class began to go from house to house. They wanted to liberate us. One teacher, Sita Didi, told my master that he was breaking the law by keeping me as a Kamlari. She talked about the law against bonded labor, and the law about children's rights, and the law on labor rights, and the law against domestic violence and trafficking. She talked to him about justice and injustice, and she demanded that he set me free. My master said no. Once made, a bond couldn't be broken. Sita Didi didn't give up. She kept arguing. She came back, day after day. And in the end, she led me home to my mother and father. I am my own master now. I have no mistress. I was the last bonded worker in my family. After me, everyone will be free. I feel as though I have power. I feel like I can do anything. And I have important things to do. Inside this house is a girl like I was. Away from her parents, working morning to night, wanting so badly to be free. We have come to this house the house of her master, to say, "We know you have a Kamlari working for you. You must set her free."
फुलको आँखामा फुलै संसार काँराको आँखामा काँरै संसार
I've seen where change comes from. When it comes, it's like a song you can't hold back. Suddenly, there's a breath moving through you and you're singing.
फुलको आँखामा फुलै संसार
And others pick up the tune and start singing too. And a sweet melody goes out into the world and touches the heart of one person, then another, and another.
The other stories, they are just as powerful as Suma's story is. They, although these 9 stories were originally part of a single film and still are, the stories can also be used, and this is really important, the stories can be used independently of each other, and the film was designed for that. They can be used in any number, in any combination over any length of time, depending on what and how you want to teach. And to make it really easy, our YouTube playlist has already has the chapters pre-divided, just as the one you saw with Suma stories. And as we said, these stories are the centerpiece of really most, if not all, of our resources. And as you can see, there are a number of them. They're all free except for the book. And I'm just going to briefly outline them. As you saw, it's the Girl Rising film and the film chapters. We also have a very robust curriculum. It's comprehensive, it's standard aligned, it has a number of guides, project-based lessons. We have the young adult book, which I mentioned. It's the only thing that's not free among our resources, and that's because the publisher won't let us make it free. Then we have a module that we designed at the beginning of COVID called Teams Rising Together. It can be taught completely virtually, or it can be taught in a hybrid situation or face-to-face in person in class. 2 very new resources we've created. One is called Future Rising, Girls' Education and Climate Change. Our new big project at Girl Rising is about this connection between girls and climate change. We just this week launched a new unit for upper elementary and middle school students called Discovering the Changemaker Within, that we're really excited about. It comes in a 2-week and a 5-week version. And it can cover a variety of content areas, including reading, writing, and definitely social studies. And many of you probably know about Flipgrid, the platform. We have about 50 plus topics on Flipgrid, and they vary from topics obviously about the girls' stories themselves, but also topics that cover issues like child marriage, or what is freedom or resilience, or the power of storytelling. And as I say, there are 50 of those. So there's a lot available. It's all very easily accessible. With that, I am going to stop talking for real now, and I'm going to turn the screen over to Anne Sharkey, and she will then in turn turn it over to Taylor Lifka.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anne Sharkey. I am a social studies teacher, like all of you. I do teach a high school, public high school, west of Chicago in Huntley, Illinois. We're kind of on the edge of suburbs and cornfields, right where they meet. My school is about 3,000 students with over 300 staff in the building. I teach AP World History as well as a series of classes in what we have here called the Global Academy. It's a series of 4 courses where the students can take looking at sustainable development, human rights, as well as service learning. And so within that, Girl Rising fits so well. I've also used it. There's an extra segment that isn't in the main film called Brave Girl Rising that's about refugees that I use in one of my other classes, my seminar class. But I've used film sections from Girl Rising or the film fully in global studies classes when we studied all different areas of the world. I got into Girl Rising initially looking at AP Human Geography. And so I saw there was somebody who teaches that. This is something we show every year to our AP Human Geography students. And it's pretty much the thing that pulls it together that is a really good way to, as Casey said earlier, kind of humanize and really get that story that's out there. I've also shown sections of it in my AP World History class. I know Taylor's going to talk about her club. We have a women's empowerment club here, and we've shown sections as far as that as well. What we do have, like I said, is this kind of special program where we have this sustainable development series of courses where the students learn about sustainable development goals. We do exchanges and we have students come over from the Philippines. We take part in all sorts of presentations and academies and things like that. Illinois as well has this Global Scholar program where they really encourage global learning. And so all of those things are just different ways where the students are really able to engage. And Girl Rising is actually one of the stories that from freshman year to senior year, when I have these students, is one of the things they remember the most. They might not remember the name, but this girl's stories really stick with them. And so it's very powerful. What I wanted to talk about was how I use Girl Rising in my global citizenship course. And so this is a mostly 9th and 10th graders, but it is open for 9th through 12th as a social studies elective. We focus on human rights, sustainable development, and really humanizing some of these different issues around the world. I always talk to them about the idea that we get so stuck in data sometimes, and data is useful. That statistic of 130 million girls out of school is powerful, but the idea of a story and a face and seeing how it interacts individually is really something that I think Girl Rising brings to life, as opposed to just reading stories or seeing the statistics. I use Girl Rising in my global citizenship class, and we watch actually the full film. I pull this into when we're studying sustainable development goals 4 and 5, so looking at quality education and gender equality. But I have a slide that I'll show as well that this is something that hits any number of different topics. And as Casey said, there's resources, whether it's child marriage or anything else, that they have as far as part of their curriculum, as well as the Flipgrid, where you could tie this to a lot of different social emotional learning topics as well. I take a really long time to show it. I think it's a film that you could do a segment or two, you could do just show it straight through. We take a really long time to watch it. We take about 4 class periods, about 180 minutes. We almost double the film time. Part of this is I have the students do reflections along the way, as I'll show on the next slides. I also pull in some of the different side resources that Girl Rising has provided to really make it to where we can get some of those stories, maybe dig a little bit deeper into a couple of the topics, have quick discussions. I have them do this in a massive packet that I've put together that really allows space for writing down reflection and reflecting on some of the different pieces. I do use the Flipgrid as a kind of assessment, as a way for me to see how the students interacted with the information, and also just see how they kind of pulled it together, connected it to their lives. And so I do have a segment for one of my students' Flipgrids as well. And so I do have them do that at home as a way to really reflect and really get involved. Some of the years in the past, I've been able to Skype or Zoom with Casey or other people from Girl Rising, which is always just great. The students are so curious about so many different aspects of the film because it really is one that is so powerful for them. What I found is really these connections, and this is a great slide, especially if you teach all sorts of different subjects, if you want to grab a quick photo of it. I've thought of just the different ways that I've used the stories over the years. Looking at it, whether it's looking at Soka's story as far as Cambodia and just the history and conflict and how conflict ties into things. My students always really like this story because, kind of the spoiler, she ends up in Chicago. So looking at that as far as some of the background, they always get really excited when they see that her in a Blackhawks jersey and everything. We've shown stories as far as Wadley and Haiti, looking at natural disasters, but there's a lot of different ways you can pull it in. Even Suma's story that you just saw, the power of music, the power of empathy, the power of that kind of modern slavery and looking at that. There's so many different ways we can pull these stories in, whether it's child marriage or homelessness, or looking at that idea of rights and freedoms of individuals, or even our story with Amina, which is the last story in the film, looking at the current events of what's going on in Afghanistan. There's so many different ways that you can pull it in. And I've used them separately. I've done the whole film. It really just depends, but this is really just realizing there's a lot of different connections that you can make. And it doesn't just have to be in a class about girls' education like mine was focusing on. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of pull it together as far as the different kind of powerful stories that are there. This is kind of what you can see as far as part of the packet that I actually give my students. One thing I did is I really kind of give some background, the idea of the location. Before we watch, we pause, we think about a couple questions, we talk through them. I give information as far as the location, those maps, and this is all stuff that I've kind of picked and chose from different parts of the curriculum that Girl Rising has given. They have country profiles, which are really helpful for students who maybe don't have a lot of background to different areas of the world. And so that's where you can see that kind of general information over there on the left in the maps. They have teacher guides for each of the stories as well. So it can be some of these important questions like these before we watch questions, thinking about what are the different themes of the different people. And they also have issue fact sheets around child marriage, around natural disasters, or any of the different topics are there. So I've been able to, over the years, kind of pick and choose and figure out what are the different directions I want to talk about each story. And so I've been able to kind of find those things as far as mix and matching, and really as a way to take my time. I did this last year on a online tool. This year I was able to do it in packets because my students were there. Looking at this as well, a lot of times I then just have them record their thoughts, their details. What do they see? What's their reaction to things? I'll have some students draw all sorts of different things, but I've also been able to connect it to other topics as well. So for example, there's Suma's song that was there that is also published. So being able to look at that and kind of think about that as a topic. So after we'll watch the segment, they'll kind of jot down the notes, but oftentimes we'll do something kind of to carry it on and to look at some of the different parts of the story. So I kind of show them it's the whole film, but we break it down into each section to really kind of dig into each story. There's also great videos as well of Suma singing online and kind of her story. So really pulling it together. I've also done, Girl Rising has additional videos as well that talk about the different things. So as we look at modern slavery in one of the classes a little bit more specifically, there's an extra video about the Kamlari of Nepal, that then we look at this, we think about the idea of the illegality of Kamlari, but why we still see this happening. And some of these different pieces, we are able to connect it to bigger issues. And so that's another way that we've been able to kind of bring it to life a little bit and get just deeper into some of the different topics along the way. The Flipgrid is a great resource. They have all sorts of attachments, and this is something that I started using just during COVID when the students were at home as a way to hear from each of them, because I know especially if you're doing a hybrid situation, it's really hard to get all those student voices. But even in the classroom, I found it then this past year really helpful as far as hearing their voices, hearing their connection to all the stories. This is something where you're able to take the whole Flipgrid from the Girl Rising main page and assign it to your class. So it has all the fact sheets, it has all that information, it has all of this together. This, as far as the Suma story, they basically have a make a connection and then kind of a question for each girl, but there are more specific ones about different topics along the way as well. What I'm going to do is go ahead and play one of my student responses. I think it's really good to hear from the students as well.
In one of the texts, it said that there are millions of young Malalas, and I thought that that was so powerful, and it gave me so much hope, and it genuinely just made me smile, because just to think that there's so many young girls out there who are so passionate like Malala was and is still, it brings so much hope that in the future more girls will get educated. And I think that that's a very powerful thing to say, and it's an amazing thing to say, because not only will it help us, economically, but it will also help us as human beings. I think personally, all girls and boys, everybody in the world should be educated anyway. So that was one of the main things that I thought was really.
So I love that as a comment, just the way that she pulls it together, connected it to the other stuff, really hearing from the students, really getting that idea that they can get those stories and can see all those pieces. We really get to that idea of kind of how it does impact them, it sticks with them, and they really learn a lot from what we see. I wanted to share a couple of quotes as far as some of my different things. Obviously, love the film. Its message has really given me a different view of girls around the world. even if it's one of those things where you're not focusing on the topic and you're not looking at girls' education, just seeing into different people's lives and having that empathy and having that way of trying to understand, I think is really powerful. The flip grid, especially a couple of these are about that, was a really good way to share, as they said, different parts of the film, having to opportunity to give their own view, share their voice, having these resources, being able to really dig into them and really kind of find that way where there are so many different people and each of the students really relate to different stories for different reasons. And so using it as a film in all these different ways has been really, really powerful and something that has inspired some of my students to go into different fields over the years. And so it has definitely been the most powerful thing that I've been able to share with my students. We're going to go ahead and flip over and Taylor is going to talk about this.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Taylor Lifka. I hope you're having a great Friday. Feel free to share something in the chat, how your morning is going, what you thought about Anne's presentation. We'd love to hear some feedback from you all. But I'm fortunate enough to be joining this presentation today. I always say, I think I'm a fan of Girl Rising. That's just how I'd classify myself. I was a high school teacher from 2017 to 2021, teaching advanced English 1 in a really small town right on the southern border of Texas and Mexico called Roma, Texas, just about 10,000 in our tiny little town. And on top of teaching English 1, I was also the Roma High School Feminist Club sponsor for my 4 years in this space. I've since transitioned to working with the National Education Equity Lab and found even in my work that there's always a way to implement Girl Rising in education. And the breadth and the depth of these resources is really, really incredible. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the online module, but before we get into that, a bit of context here about my club and my scholars, girls and boys for that matter, even though only reflecting women here in this photo. But this is the Roma High School Feminist Club. The club was started by students back in 2017. I was approached by 2 scholars who had the vision to start this club. And I think that really connects back to Girl Rising. We're all about agency and students being a voice for change. That's me there on the bottom with the arrow. I know I can kind of blend in with these gals. But the mission of the Roma High School Feminist Club, and I really like to read this verbatim because my scholars wrote this and I think it's so beautiful. The mission of the Roma High School Feminist Club is to spread ideas about gender fluidity and intersectional feminism in Starr County, while educating and empowering community members to become allies and advocates for change in our own hometown in a way that ensures that everyone can be proud and comfortable in their own identity markers. That's really important, I think, to add some context to about where we are. Like I said, a really small town right on the border of Mexico and the United States. A lot of our scholars actually live in Miguel Alemán in Mexico and then cross the border daily. And living in a border town is incredibly beautiful and has a lot of rich culture and tradition. But in the same token, there is also a lot of machismo that really infiltrates our community, meaning this strong and aggressive masculine pride, which can be very harmful not only to our women, but also to our men in the community. And I mentioned that to give some context as to how and why Girl Rising's resources are so relevant to our scholars in a way that they feel there are women who are able to use their voice and become these agents of change in a way that they wish to become as well. So the resource I'm going to be talking about is the Teen Rising Together. It's an online module, and I was able to use this module with my scholars when we were in the pandemic, when we were 100% virtual. So this module spans an hour worth of time, and it's an opportunity for scholars to hear Suma's story, which we just watched, as well as Wadley's. And it takes this really interactive approach, which I think is so beautiful in a way to really engage our scholars, especially to break away from that traditional lecture question type of learning experience. Not only do scholars get the opportunity to watch the videos, but there are interactive questions, places to pause and reflect, to create really beautiful discussion. And something that I love the most about the Teen Rising Together module is everything is already done for you. I know I'm preaching to the crowd when I say that teachers are overwhelmed and at times undervalued. There's a massive pile on your desk of resources that you'd love to, look through, but we don't always have the time and the wherewithal to do that. And so Teen Rising Together is an awesome opportunity to, sit down on a Friday and go through this with your scholars with really little to no prep time needed. Everything is there. It's a beautiful opportunity to engage with your scholars in a fun and exciting way that also culminates in a project-based learning experience. So if you go online, and all of these links will be available to you all, we can send them in the chat or a follow-up email for easy accessibility. But when you go online, you have this opportunity to click for either middle schoolers or high schoolers, depending on what you're teaching, and it will guide you through this online experience. Like I said, you'll be able to watch the videos, you will be asked questions, there'll be checks for understanding, you can stop and engage that way. There's great questions to get your students thinking and have that critical type opportunity to connect in the way that Anne showed her student doing really, really beautifully in the previous slides. And there's even an opportunity to do more. Everything is there on this page. It's very accessible and easy for your scholars to access. The way I did it with my girls was in 2 sections. So the module lasts about an hour. But we met back-to-back weeks. One week we met for 30 minutes and took a look at Wadley's story and went through the questions and the discussion points. And then the next week we looked at Suma's story. And then the next week we did the project. So there's so many ways to break it up with whatever works best for you and the time that you have. After you go through the online module, it ends with this project, which is to make a meme. Very relevant, right, to right now and what our kids are interested and engaged in. I think so much about what it means to teach in an age when the internet is right at our fingertips, and what are the kids seeing all the time, but these different posts on social media. And so why not play into that and make sure that what we're doing as teachers is something that really actually speaks to our kids. So there's this slide at the end that gives your scholars an opportunity to make their own meme. They give you these great examples of what should your meme do, right? You have an opportunity to let your meme inform the community, to inspire the community, or to amplify somebody's voice or somebody's idea. And you can do this in many different ways through Canvas or other online platforms. And they give you those here through technology tips. There's links that are hyperlinked here. So again, very little to no planning necessary. Just log right on and go through this experience with your kids. Like I said, I did this through the pandemic virtually, but if I was still teaching in the classroom, this would be a perfect Friday activity. Everyone has their Chromebook, and it's just really a great way to break up the monotony sometimes that we get in the nitty gritty of the day-to-day. So I would be remiss not to share some of these memes that my scholars created. And the way we use these afterward was our girls and boys, everyone in our group, we have an Instagram account, the Roma High School Feminist Club. So we were able to share them there, right? They're posted right directly on the Instagram feed. We also have a bulletin board in the cafeteria for the Roma High School Feminist Club. These images were printed out, blown up, and pasted there for all to see. I'm just going to read out some of these. I love this one. Reminder, girl, you are strong as hell. Hashtag rising to educate girls. One girl with courage is a revolution. That's a quote directly from one of the clips that you watch. A lot of our students are Spanish speakers, so we encourage our students to write in their language of choice. It says, "Say la extra and extraordinaria, be the extra and extraordinary. We are queens, our souls are royal." My student Stephanie did a great job here on the left, taking that opportunity to inform. Did you know that if all girls and women completed secondary school, they could add up to $30 trillion to the global economy? I think that's really striking. And then the last one, also written in Spanish, "Juntas somos más fuertes. Together we are stronger." So just like Anne, I want to conclude here with some of the thoughts from my own scholars. I think this one on the right is important. It says, "I'm feeling very inspired because it's really impactful knowing that anyone can make a big difference in the lives of others. that came directly from a student of mine who lives in Miguel Alemán in Mexico and talks a lot about the femicides that are occurring across the border and really just running rampant through Latin America. And, you know, being able, as Anne said, not only to hear these statistics, but then to see through a real woman's story, the way that these incredible women are making waves and making a change in their own community, I think really inspires our girls to feel like they too can be agents in their own community and make a genuine difference. What else do we have here? This other scholar says, I found this documentary eye-opening. It serves as an example that one person indeed can make a difference in the lives of others and create a domino effect felt in the world. To that same feeling here, I think whether your students have a deep connection, like I'm saying mine do, living right on the southern border, seeing this, some of them in their day-to-day lives, that's this really big connection piece. But even if that's not the case, Girl Rising does this incredible job of just building empathy and awareness of the world around you. So thank you all so much for listening and engaging with us today. I know we have a little bit of time left, and Anne's going to guide us through some group thought and some reflection together.
Thanks. Yeah, what we wanted to really do is just in the end have us think about this idea of how can we bring Girl Rising to our students. This is something, girls and boys, is super powerful and impactful as far as them learning about it. So we wanted to give an opportunity to brainstorm in the chat, but also as this is not a very big group, we also have the ability to kind of talk about some of the different ways that we can use this, talk about different classes. If you have questions for either of us as well, we have about 15 minutes here to go ahead and go through some of this content. So I am going to stop sharing so we can see everyone, but we do want to say thank you anyway, even though I know we still have some time, we'll come back to it. But and if you have any ideas of how you could use it or questions of how to use it, feel free to go ahead and share it in the chat, as well as unmute and kind of give us your ideas or thoughts, or what is your reflection or reaction so far?
As you know, an AP Human Geography teacher, I mean, like you said, there are just so many connections. Gender equity, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are all, you know, in our objectives and curriculum. So I can think of numerous opportunities within the different units to integrate it. In terms of teaching government, you know, we talk about human rights and comparative government structures around the world. And as the video pointed out, you can have laws, but if those laws aren't enforced, then obviously, you know, this is where we end up in situations like unfortunately Suma experienced. So.
Yeah, and the great thing about this film for AP Human Geography is I've used it anywhere from middle of first semester talking about culture all the way to using at the end as a way that we can pull it all together. It's a great thing about it as far as it hitting so many different subjects. Whether your kids have background in the content or not, it is something, it does a good job educating along the way as well. And so even if it's something you haven't gotten to in class, it's really going to helpful. I've used even Suma's story as far as the slavery relating to the ideas of even racism. You can get rid of some of the racist laws, but the idea of changing the hearts and minds of individuals and how we need to keep moving as far as that. And so you can make lots of different connections to other topics.